Hey everyone, it's Rye bringing you part 5 of my Learning Lekmod series. This is a video that is going to be very difficult to make. It's going to be multi-part in the sense that I'll have a lot of supplements to this video, right? It's impossible to cover everything you need to know about settling cities in however long this video is going to be. So following this video, I'll probably put something in the description or post something on my channel where I talk to some of the best other Civ players and we look at spawns and we kind of assess how we would go about settling those cities. But you know, it's hard to make a video on this, like I said, but I'm going to try my best. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. This is not something that you can watch this video and learn perfectly, right? It's not as simple as learning how to multi-steel workers. This is almost like an art form in a sense. Like some people are really good at settling consistently good cities. Some people are not. Knowing what to look for, understanding how fast cities take to come online, looking at the positive and negatives of the city, understanding opportunity cost for settling on resources, right? There's a number of things that goes into kind of your total overall game plan and is a part of settling cities. So I'm going to try my best to cover very, very high level while still going into detail about specific examples. But yeah, let's just jump right in. This is a pretty long intro. Okay, so the first thing I would want to say about settling cities is understanding what you get when you press the B button or you press settle. So rules of thumb for settling cities. So when you're on a hill, unlike in, actually as the same as in vanilla, you get 2 food and 2 hammers, right? But unlike vanilla, when you're not on a hill, you get, instead of the 2 food, 1 hammer, you get 3 food, 1 hammer. Now, what's better, question mark, is very much up to preference. You can ask, I'd say it's a pretty even split between what people prefer. I personally am on the not a hill train. I'd rather grow. But, you know, a lot of really, really strong players believe on hill is strictly superior because it makes you build settlers faster and it lets you, you know, get your early infrastructure going a little bit quicker, right? And base hammers are a very important aspect of this game. So understanding the positives of on a hill versus not on a hill is very important. You know, if you have a lot of food, maybe you could justify going on a hill. If you have a lot of hammers, maybe not on a hill makes the most sense. So just something to think about when you're assessing whether to go on a hill or not. Like the benefits are about the same. But how can we enhance this even further? What about settling can make this an even better experience? So some important things to think about. If you are settling on a resource that has an inherent hammer to it, so for instance, if you remove the forest from a hardwood tile, right? From this, if you remove the jungle from this hardwood tile, it's going to be 0 food, 3 hammers if it's on a hill. It's going to be 1 food, 2 hammers if it's on a plains, right? It's the exact same thing as a horse. It's 1 food, 2 hammers. Because the initial tile is 3 food, 1 hammer, anything additional once the forest or jungle is removed gets added on to that city tile. So for instance, if you settle on a plains horse, right, the inherent tile when you settle on any plains is going to be, let's say it's flatland, it's going to be 3 food, 1 hammer. But because we're settling on a horse, we're actually going to gain a hammer in the city. So it's instead going to be 3 food, 2 hammers. Okay, and the same thing can be said for if we're settling on a hill hardwood or a hill iron or something like that, where the inherent tile is 2 hammers. But because the resource is on the tile, it gives us an extra hammer. So in that case, it'd be on a hill, we get 2 food, 3 hammers, right? Same thing works with tea, right? coal, oil, etc. Right, like any type of resource that gives you an inherent hammer works. Okay, so this actually does work with civs that give bonuses to resources such as that, or to strategic. So the obvious example is Russia, right? Russia gives +1 hammer to all strategic resources, so iron and horses in the early game. If we settle on an iron tile as Russia, we actually do retain that hammer. So this is just a turn 0 or turn 1 settle as Russia on a hill on iron. It's 2 food, 4 hammers. Right? This is why Russia can be so insanely good. One of the reasons, of course. But one important thing I'll note, and this does confuse some people, this does not work with civs that give bonuses to improvements, not the strategic themselves, not the base strategic, but the improvement. So for instance, Belgium gives all plantations +1 hammer. It doesn't give plantation resources 1 hammer. It gives the plantation themselves a hammer. So this wouldn't work because when you settle on a plantation, you're not improving it. Right? You're not creating a plantation. You're just settling on the tile. Same thing with Huns. When we settle on a horse as Huns, we're not getting the extra hammer similar to that we would get from Russia because it's pastures that Huns gets the bonus hammer from. Okay, so I want to make that distinction very clear because this does confuse a lot of people. But in general, settling on a resource such as the ones above will yield 1 extra hammer. And this actually does work with things like if you settle on grassland bison, right? If you settle on grassland bison and you build a granary, that granary is going to give +1 food to the bison tile. The bison's still there. We're going to get the 1 extra food in our capital. So now that bison is going to let our city have 4 food, 1 hammer, right? So making that distinction is very important. And that's actually a good way to learn how to settle better cities and why rivers in general can be complete bait. So let's jump right back into where we left off in episode 3, right? And in episode 4, we talked about stealing workers, and I kind of talked about why stealing from Havana here wouldn't be that great, but stealing from Tallinn or Masaru would be phenomenal. Let's assume that the diplomatic discussion we talked about with Moors is still in full swing, so we can't steal from Masaru because Moors wants to steal from Masaru. It's their only city-state in this hypothetical. So let's steal from Tallinn this game. And we're going to be, going for a settler over here, as we mentioned before. So what's important to look at? Well, there's a couple things. Any city with a first ring chop is infinitely better than one without. It drastically speeds up your time to build a granary, right? That a chop on first ring is 13 hammers, right? That is essentially cutting this granary cost in a third, right? We're getting a 33% discount on building a granary, and a granary is something that drastically snowballs your game. So getting the granary faster is pivotal. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So this city is very, very strong because there's 3 first ring chops, right? Incredibly powerful. So this land is very, very strong because there's so many chops. Okay, what else can we do? Well, this is a multiplayer setting. We have to assume that this is a human being that wants to settle cities. In this case, if I'm settling here, I have a strong suspicion he's going to be settling for this stuff, like over here. And in that case, let's just assume he wants the coconut tile. Okay, that's completely reasonable. So what can we do to stop him from intruding on us? We have to think about how we can settle defensively. And settling defensively is a very important part about Civ, especially when you're a new player. It can be the single reason why people don't attack you. And yet it also is one of the hardest things to learn because war is such an intricate part of this game that a lot of people don't fully understand. So in this case, we have a city here. And as we know, we can't settle within 3 rings of our city, so it has to be somewhere on the 4th ring. So where can we put this next city? We want to set up a boundary. We want to settle fairly close to ourselves. You know, one thing I see a lot of new players do is they won't settle minimum distance cities because it's not enough tiles late game. It doesn't matter. The priority should not be on what our game looks like on turn 150. It should be, what does our game look like on turn 50 or on turn 75?
And the reason I'm wanting to make that distinction between 50 and 75 is that early in the game is when people determine if they want to attack you or not. If you're showing you're still OCC by turn 25 and then maybe you're going to make settlers, you're going to get charioted most of the time. You know, or later in the game, like turn 50, if you're really weak, someone in your neighbor who might be having a high tempo game could decide, okay, I'm just going to go crossbow this guy really fast. So there's a lot of different things that you need to be thinking about when you're deciding, you know, if you want to go for a fast-paced game or you want to take your time settling cities that might be far out, right? Like if you settle, you know, a city over here for this on incense city or something. Yeah, that could work, but it's rather far away. It's going to be hard for you to defend. It's going to take a lot longer to come online, right? And these are just things you have to think about. So let's just jump right into this game. I kind of walked you through last time where our first settle will be. It's going to be right here. 3 first ring chops allows us to pretty much instantly build a worker or 2. And grows really fast because of Lake Victoria. And then additionally, like, where's our next city going to go? This is stuff we have to be thinking about and how we need to move our units to account for where they can be. Well, our next city, let's play the part of like this defensive thing. If we agreed on our last time that this can be his city state to steal from, he's probably going to be settling around here. This coconut is definitely his rather than mine. So how can we avoid getting pincered in between our 2 cities and having this like Victoria city pretty much being disconnected and easily cut off? We need to settle something defensively. A really good defensive city would be right here. Alternatively, if we weren't settling here, you could go on this flatland tile, but you know, in general, I think on this hill is also very strong. And then finally, we can settle one over here to pick up these sea resources. I think right here is actually a triple luck city, so that's really strong. And then finally, what we didn't talk about last time that I should have mentioned is that this city state's also phenomenal to steal from, right? Having a city where we can, you know, steal from this tile as it moves from, you know, the city looks like it's around here, either to the coffee or to this hill, really, really great for us. So let's go meet this city state real quick, and then let's get back into it. So right now I'm going to be bringing this warrior back a little bit. So we're going to be choosing between Tallinn, or we're going to be choosing between whatever the city state is down here. So let's just improve this Lux because we're already here. I'll have another video purely on worker micro, as it is without a doubt one of the most important skills that really can hurt new players because, you know, they might be autoing workers in single player, but it can be one of the highest value, most important skills in the entire game. And learning to worker micro properly is borderline mandatory if you want to be a competitive player in the group. So let's think about, we can touch on technologies right here. What do we look for? Well, as tradition, the most important thing, and this goes for anything, is getting the technologies to work your luxuries. So what do we need for luxuries here? We need masonry for obsidian. I think we free tech masonry, so that's fine. We need calendar for olives, which we already have. It doesn't look like we need trapping for any luxes. So that's always nice. But trapping's just good to have, right? Deer tiles are some of the highest value tiles in the game. It looks like we do need bronze, right, for this citrus right here. And this is second ring citrus, so it's definitely something we're going to be doing. The other thing I'd like to mention is that there's a horse right here. I think, maybe someone who watches this video for the first time could be baited by the power of settling on horse. I would think more about, okay, what do you need from a city? What do you need from this specific city? I need this city to be really strong. I need it to build my guilds later in the game, likely. So having fresh water is pretty important. Additionally, the speed at which you get from the horse is almost offset by the fact that there's another first ring chop here. So it's definitely, you could argue it. I could totally see a place where some people think, on horse is better. But I'd say in general, touching Lake Vic is just it's just much better. So we're just going to keep going here. Looks like this is going to have no problems. We can take this worker steal from Gabrone. It looks like Talon doesn't have its worker done yet, which is perfect. So we're going to steal that. Then we're going to bring this up here and finish there. So where is this worker going to be going? That's kind of the next question. If we know we're settling one on this hill and one up here, we don't have a city to the left of us. At least one that's not coming until much later. So how do we offset that? Well, this worker has to go to the fastest tile it can, which is actually going to be right here. Or, yeah, probably around the olives. So this worker should be headed straight to the olives, which means this worker... What do we do with these two workers? Well, one of them has to go to the new city, right? That's mandatory almost. The other one should be improving luxuries, right? With Lake Vic, we're going to be growing extremely fast. So just something to keep in mind. The other thing is once you get a luxury improved, you should be instantly looking for trades with other players. Obviously, the AI kind of throws that for a loop, but in general, so there's Rome.
Augustus.
In general, we should be always looking for this. So right here, we have a trade with the AI for truffles. Even in multiplayer games, right, I would be able to trade this lapis for citrus. Even though it doesn't help us, either one of us, it's really important to get your regionals out as soon as possible. So always select a social policy before settling a city, as it increases your policy cost aside from the very first city you settle. So let's work the Lake Vic and bring this down. Great. And then actually, because there's a camp here, I know there can't be really barbs over here without them kind of going towards Talon. So I can move this warrior over here to almost block future barb camps. And then in terms of build orders, I'm going to have a whole video on build orders because it's a contested discussion between a lot of people. Some people think that, you should always go granary first on tradition. I pretty much am an advocate for almost exclusively being worker first. So I'll have to make a video about that at some point. But in general, we're going to do worker first because there's a lot of chops that, workers on this city specifically are going to really, really help speed it up. So we'll fortify there, move this over here, and then we'll go straight to this citrus. Perhaps bring this up, bring this to the olives, and then I like getting a pillage off on city states. Gives you money, and it draws a worker towards the city. So if I pillage this coffee tile, it's likely that the worker is going to come directly back to that coffee, and it lets me repeat steal on that tile. So the next tech, so we just finished getting bronze for this tile over here. Because we grew, and because it's Lake Victoria, I can actually just stay on this horse, but normally you'd be moving back to the food. the next thing you have to think about is, okay, what do I want to do in terms of text? Like, where am I going? Tradition in mid game or post settling is a lot about getting wonders and getting important wonders. So for me, I put a lot of emphasis on getting an early oracle. So that's where I'm going to head. But you could just as easily argue going Hanging Gardens is really good because you don't have a garden, and this cap isn't super high food because it's plains, though there is a large river system. So you could argue going Hanging Gardens, but we'll talk about this later. But really, the power of tradition is getting that finisher and getting those free aqueducts. So we're gonna head to Oracle Tech right now. But this varies game to game. So if you have a player in your lobby who's doing the nonsense with Great Library Oracle, obviously that's off the table. So just something to keep in mind. I'm gonna post up there, and then this can help Garrett, help escort. Let's build a granary here. All this is quite standard, I'd say. Not doing anything crazy with this chop. And then with one of our new units, aside from this one, because this is stealing, we can start meeting people. And then we should always be looking for trades, right? So this is sugar for citrus. I don't have my citrus up yet, but it's important to secure that trade when possible. All right, so we're just going to press settle. This is one of the nice things about settling min distance. I can work, this tile, or I could work this improved tile. So if I switch to this, I just gained essentially hammers where I need them. And this is going to go worker first as well because there's a lot of first ring chops, right? So it's all about kind of maintaining momentum. Tradition as a whole is actually one of the harder, I've said this before, but it's one of the harder trees in the game to play because not the technical aspect of playing tradition is difficult, right? Like we said this before, but actually I need to switch this back to ensure I can get this granary down too. The technicals of playing tradition aren't very difficult. The hard part about tradition is winning. And how do you win on tradition? Oh, here's the worker as we mentioned that it would be coming. Let's do another chop and then another chop. And then honestly, we can let's count how many workers we have right now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 workers, 6. And then maybe let's do one more. We don't need the granary yet. It's a Lake Victoria city. There's going to be plenty of food. Bring this down here. This across. Finish. Terrific. Chop, chop. And now we can head directly into Stonehenge. But, I have a number of chops left. I have a ton of tiles still to improve. So, it's totally fine. Let's go to worker first. Worker is totally fine here. In fact, it's probably best. Unless we know someone's going to be contesting Stonehenge, it's probably best to do. So right here, we're just going to be improving tiles. And then I'm going to bring this back. I actually kind of want to buy this olive tile because this city needs some sort of food tile before it ends up growing to the bison. So that's just something nice to do. Right here, looks like we're 2 food off, so it's not going to be happening, which is unfortunate. But we can buy this tile here, and then that's totally fine. And now we can, again, utilizing the fact that we can share tiles, I can maybe rework this and then work these 2. And that gets me a worker a little bit faster. Right, so I still have 1 citrus left, which is good. I have 1 olives left. You know, you're not always going to be able to get trades for olives because, you know, it's not your regional. So it's possible someone else has them. But, you know, in these kinds of games, if you have it, I also have a citrus here, and it looks like Axum's not trading with me, or he doesn't have his luxuries up. So I'm going to show you why we use EUI real quick. The reason we were going to use EUI is I'm going to go into the terrain. So you can press F3. And then I'm going to spawn an Old Faithful in the water here. And then I'm going to scroll all the way over to the right, and I'm going to go to your land, and I'm going to give myself that. So this is replicating as if I had just gotten a trade deal with the AI. So I just know in my head, like, okay, I'm not going to trade with AXA. Because I essentially did. All right. So finish that, and then we'll bring this over to Chop. We're heading right to Oracle, as mentioned, but you know, you could head to any wonder if you really want, you know. Still want to finish this in 2. Let's head to a granary actually now so that we can send trade routes. Looks like there's a city-state over there, which is nice. And it looks like Maceru's actually got a quest for us. Doing these quests is actually super important. Honestly, one of the highest RNG factors in deciding if your game is going to be really strong or if it's going to be especially strong is CS quests. So, you know, getting lucky with CS quests is definitely something good. All right, so here we just stole 3 workers by turn 31 from 1 city-state. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think this land is good on 8, but, you know, you could totally argue going 9 is what you want to do. So, you know, I'm going to keep this guy alive. I knew he was going to live, so I can keep him alive. Maybe I'm a big fan of just taking heal promos. It's just not worth it's just not worth the risk usually that's associated with that. And then we're gonna just chop here, let's build a granary, chop, and then get a caravan, right? Like you can see kind of what I'm talking about when it comes to tempo and how fast we're able to bring these cities online just with the power of chops. So following Oracle, you know, as it looks, like it actually makes probably the most sense to have done trapping first, because still building Stonehenge, rushing Oracle, though usually really strong. I don't have a faith source, so going for Oracle is actually what we wanted to do. So we played around 18 turns. Compare this to where we were before, night and day, right? This is kind of a this is looking to become a very, very strong game. Lots of potential. We have pretty much everything we're looking for in terms of, a fast start, have, a good city layout, lots of luxuries. Like if we go back to the, where is it? The list before, we can see that we're looking for 4 cities on tradition. Yep. Monument. Nope, we skipped a monument. Workers per city, 2 to 2.5, right? So trying to get up to 9 or maybe 10. And then luxuries per city, 1.5 to 2. So let's count how many luxuries we have. We have 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. So this is 4. The cap doesn't really count. And then 1, 2, 3. So that is more than 2 per city. This would be a very, very strong game. We wouldn't have to even think about building coliseums. The problem is that we have double olives that we need to kind of get rid of at some point. But, we can pay people maybe for King's Days, or we can pay them a certain amount of gold to take it, or maybe, we could be a little tricky with how we're doing things. But this is overall a really, really strong layout. We're expected to get Stonehenge around turn maybe 37. Once we take aristocracy. So 37 Stonehenge is perfectly reasonable. I would expect to get Stonehenge even without meeting people, unless they're actively griefing your game. So I'd say right here's a good stopping point. We'll pick this up in the next video as we kind of enter tradition mid-game and tradition theory in general. But this is a very good idea of kind of understanding how to settle cities, what we have to look for, right? The defensive nature of this city makes it really hard for him to push into us, even with, a fairly overexposed Lake Victoria city. The greed of this city, triple luxury, double fish, right? It's going to pay off later on, but, growing to these tiles is not much of a problem for us because we're tradition. If we weren't tradition, this city would be absolutely terrible. But because we're tradition, we're able to make up for the fact that all of our good tiles are in the second or third ring. So this is how you have to be thinking about these cities, right? In terms of layouts, like I'd say this is fairly stretched relative to normal tradition games I'd play, right? I've had games where every single city I've settled is min distance and the game is incredibly strong. You don't have to settle farther away, but the further away it is, obviously the more tiles it's going to have by itself. This city's really hurting, if this city was settled here instead of on this tile, right? Which was the alternative. We settle here. We kind of got baited by the fact that these two fish are really strong. Getting an incense is really good. But let's say, olives, we didn't have the olives or something. And, maybe there's a couple more resources to the left of us and we didn't want to settle on this coast to avoid getting taxed later in the game. This min distance would be phenomenal, right? We could share the citrus tile. We could share this horse tile. We could share the deer tile. We could share the sheep tile. It doesn't matter that a lot of the city's tiles are in the third and second ring, because we can use the tiles in our capital to supplement the early game. That would drastically help speed this city up. So this is kind of what we have to be thinking about, and overall, like how to have a good layout. Is every game going to be this straightforward? No, it's not. This was land that fairly, I'd say settled itself. Oftentimes, you're not going to have games like that, and it's going to be a little more counterintuitive, so you have to kind of get creative. And this is kind of where I said, like, settling cities is almost an art form because everyone can kind of approach it differently. Everyone has a different opinion on it, and different people appreciate different things. So hopefully this was helpful. And stay tuned for part 6, as well as a more, an extension of this concept as we move into alternative ways to settle and more, free-form discussion with some other really strong players on how they would go about settling cities. So thanks for watching. And yeah, stay tuned for the next one.